Hello, my lovelies. We are going to read the book called Release Miss Terrortoes, written by W.G. White. Chapter 1. Joseph could clearly remember the first time he had met Miss Terrortoes. He was only 3 years old at the time, and he had just received the greatest pet a 3-year-old could ask for. It was brand new, shaped like a rocket, and had astronauts under it. Best of all, it was an actual bed, not a coat. Finally, Joseph was grown up. It had been a long 3 years, but he had made it. Unable to contain his excitement, Joseph burst from Dad's arms and dived headfirst onto the mattress. It bounced and he squealed with joy. Someone is happy, Dad grinned. I'm a rocket. Zoom. Joseph burrowed under the blanket and wiggled to get comfortable. Nighty sleep, he said. Nighty sleep. Dad laughed. It's only 3 p.m., Joseph. Joseph pretended to snore. Well, I guess I will have to eat Joseph's dessert tonight, said Dad as he went to the door. Oh well, Joseph almost jumped up. Dessert was the most important meal of the day. Still, his new bed trumped even Dad's homemade apple pie. He kept still, snoring louder and louder until Dad left. Joseph stopped his snoring and sat upright. He bounced, wiggled, and crawled all over his bed. Exhausted, he lay back, and what was that? Someone was snoring, but it wasn't Joseph. This was a deep, terrible snore, like a chugging steam train or that. It was coming from underneath the bed. Although he was scared, Joseph knew he couldn't hide under the blankets. He was a big kid now. Big kids were brave. He slipped onto the floor and got on his hands and knees. It was dark under the bed, but he could see the outline of the lamp. His eyes adjusted and the lamp became furry. The furry lamp grew big, floppy ears. The furry lamp with big floppy ears bounced forward, knocked Joseph onto his back and sat on his chest. It looked like a rabbit crossed with a bear, crossed with a pig. It had a wet, twitching nose and a pair of dull tusks sticking out of its bottom jaw. But most obvious of all was the thing's massive, ridiculous, outright silly toes. They were enormous, almost as big as the rest of its body. It twitched those toes as it sat on Joseph's chest, and although they were terribly big and terribly scary, they were also terribly tickly. Stop, Joseph laughed, cried as he wriggled, but the monster didn't stop, and Joseph laughed until he had to roll away. Joseph and the monster stared at one another. You snore loud, said Joseph. I like you. He sat cross-legged and thought for a moment. His new friend needed a name. Miss Edith Terrortoes, he declared. And Edith, with her terribly big toes, did a little hop. Chapter 2. The years passed one by one, and both Joseph and Miss Edith Terrortoes grew bigger and uglier. Well, Edith got uglier. Joseph looked like a regular boy who would learn quickly to keep his furry friend a secret from mom and dad. Mom and dad didn't approve of monsters. Not a lot of people liked monsters. They were noisy and smelly and sometimes a bit too playful. Despite monsters being everywhere, people did their best to ignore them. But not Joseph. Joseph loved Edith and Edith loved him too. They had played in his room every night before bed, wrestling, tickling, and racing around. After dark, Joseph would sneak into the kitchen and take a plateful of leftover vegetables for Edith to devour. Edith adored the old Brussels sprouts. The smellier the better. At night, when Joseph was snuggling up nice and warm in his bed, Edith would stay up watching and protecting. She paced the room, searching introduce for intruders or any sort of danger. When she was happy, Joseph was safe. She had squeezed under the bed, curl up and begin to snore. It had been 6 years since Joseph had discovered Miss Edith Terrortoes living beneath his bed. Those snores would strike terror into the hearts of most people, but Joseph found them comforting. Edith's snoring was as vital to Joseph as a good night's kiss from mom or dessert, which is why Joseph's world came to a screeching halt when those snores stopped. Chapter 3. I saw a tree shark yesterday, Toby exclaimed. Toby was new to the area, but he and Joseph had quickly bonded over a shared love of monsters. The boys were walking home from school. It was a Friday afternoon and Toby was going to stay the night so he could meet Edith. There were few people in the entire world who obsessed over monsters as much as Toby. It was all pointy and stuff, said Toby, like a hedgehog. I wonder why they don't call them tree hogs or hedge sharks. He was carrying his book of monsters, which was basically a list of all known monsters from Bigfoot to Nessie. Toby really wanted to identify what sort of monster it was. Joseph didn't mind what sort of monster she was, but didn't see the harm in finding out. We are home, Joseph called as he and Toby wandered into the living room where they found Joseph's parents. Something was wrong. Joseph knew because Dad wasn't wearing his apron. Dad was always cooking something. Please sit down, Joseph, said Mom. She was still wearing her work suit. Another bad sign. Joseph and Toby sat on sofa. A knot was forming in Joseph's stomach and he couldn't untangle it no matter how much he shifted and wiggled. This won't be easy to hear, Mom continued softly, but we found something under your bed. A monster? Dad blurted out. A big, disgusting monster. Oh no, Joseph felt like a bucket of ice had been dunked on his head. They had found Edith. Don't be upset, dear, Mom said gently. Dad forced himself to breathe slowly. Sorry, they are just so. I was talking to Joseph. Mom crouched and put a hand on Joseph's knee. We got rid of it, okay? You are perfectly safe. That awful, awful thing can't hurt you any. Edith, Joseph lunged off the sofa and rushed upstairs. Joseph, his mom shouted after him. Joseph burst into his bedroom, dropped to the floor, and looked under the bed. Edith was gone. No, sighed Joseph. He spent the next half an hour searching his room from top to bottom. Toby came and helped look, but it was no good. Miss Edith Terrortoes was nowhere to be seen. The only thing Joseph found was a pamphlet which read, Tickety and Splits, ready very good, Master Hunting Company. Chapter 4. In all his 9 years, Joseph had never realized just how dark and spooky his bedroom was at night. The moon shining through the open curtains projected sinister shadows onto his wall. One looked like a reaching claw, whilst another took the shape of a spiky cage. A creak of floorboards set Joseph's heart racing. He clutched his duvet cover up to his nose and shivered. Without Edith's blanket of snoring, Joseph could hear every noise in the entire house, no matter how small. The ticking of his clock drilled into his mind was the clank and clank of pipes in the walls tapped at his imagination. It was much, much too quiet. Nearby, Toby slept on a blew-up mattress. His pajamas had pictures of all kinds of monsters on them. To Joseph, each one looked like a death. What would Lickety and Split, those awful hunters, be doing to Edith? Was she as scared as Joseph? Was she in pain? He couldn't bear to think about it. Yet, that's all he could do. All night long, Joseph thought of nothing but his friend and how confused and scared she must be feeling. At the first sign of daylight, Joseph had enough. He jumped out of bed and shook Toby awake. Monsters, Toby said groggily. Come on, we are getting her back, explained Joseph, as he grabbed a backpack and started filling it with clothes and other essentials. Get who back? Asked Toby, whose hair was so messy he looked like a monster himself. Joseph slotted fresh batteries into his megaphone and clipped the cover into place. Miss Edith Terrortoes. Chapter 5. With a bag full of supplies and a mission in mind, Joseph and Toby marched into town. Lickety and Split's address was on the back of their pamphlet, along with drawing of the hunters themselves. They were huge, mountainous men with full beards and perfect smiles. Here it is, said Joseph as they arrived at a narrow, run-down building sandwiched between a pet shop and a dye store. I'm gonna record this on my phone, said Toby, in case we see any rare monsters. Joseph nodded, pushed the door open, and was surprised by a horrible stench. It was like a poorly managed zoo mixed with an abandoned farm. Lickety and Split's really very good monster hunting company was dark. moist and covered in muck. The furniture was wonky, the floor was crooked, and even the walls seemed lopsided and uneven. Just past a pair of rotten doors at the back of the room, Joseph could see cramped cages with sad and uncomfortable monsters stuffed inside, but no sign of Edith. I demand the release of Miss Edith Terrortoes, shouted Joseph as he stormed up to the welcome desk. Two men lounged on plush rocking chairs behind the desk. One was tall and thin, with narrow, rat-like features. The other was plump and round, with a squished, squinting face. There wasn't even a chin hair to be shared between them, let alone a full beard. "Do you hear that, Lickety?" said the lanky man with a yellow bent smirk. "I do hear it, Split," replied the plump man, grinning. "This kid is demanding." "That's right," said Joseph. "She is my friend, and you have no right to—" "No right?" howled Split. His friend roared Lickety. The hunters rocked on their chair, laughing until they had to wipe tears away from their eyes. "Listen here, you little savage," Lickety snapped. His laughter vanished and was replaced by a mean snarl. "Monsters are nobody's friend. They are messy beasts," said Split, who unpeeled himself from his chair and towered over Joseph and Toby. "They are ugly pests," continued Lickety, who would also manage to roll himself out of his seat. "They are dangerous animals." Split took a step closer and the boys instinctively moved backward. "Stinky brutes." Lickety followed, his feet thundering on the floor. "Evil plagues." The hunter continued to stalk forward, pushing Joseph and Toby closer and closer to the door. "Monsters are a lot of things, boys," shouted Lickety as Joseph and Toby were forced back out onto the street. "But they are certainly not friends," finished Split, who slammed the door, leaving only cruel laughter ringing in Joseph's ear. Chapter 6. Well, that went almost exactly as Joseph had expected. Thankfully, he had come prepared. Within the hour, the boys had created protest signs using supplies from the nearby dye store and were chanting, "Release Miss Terrortoes," over and over. Joseph used his megaphone and managed to draw a small crowd of curious onlookers. But when people realized the boys were fighting to help the monsters, they soon showed their true colors. "Look them up and throw away the key," sneered one woman. "A monster ate my lunch last week," said another. "I hate them all. Daft boys," muttered an old man. "We hunt monsters for a reason. Monsters are bad," people moaned. "Monsters are messy," people cried. "We don't want them," people declared. Yet Joseph and Toby continued their protest. Knowing that people were wrong, they shouted and demanded for Edith's release, until a small voice cut through the ever-growing rabble of onlookers. "The monster hunters took my best friend too. It was a girl, a little younger than Joseph. He was small and blue, and I loved him. And they took him away. She picked up a sign and joined the protest. Something shifted in the onlookers, and it was as if a dam broke. Kids and adults of all shapes and sizes rushed forward in support of the monsters. Some created their own signs, others simply took up the chant. Release the monsters, release the monsters, release the monsters. Before long, the protesters outnumbered the onlookers and more were arriving from all over town as word spread. Inside Lickety and Split's really very good monster hunting company, Lickety and Split watched on through a grubby window with a growing sense of worry. When the local news vans arrived, Joseph knew they were starting to make a difference. Before long, national news crews showed up, then international reporters. Word continued to spread thick and fast as monster supporters joined in from all over the world. People were protesting about monster hunters everywhere, from America to Germany, Australia to New Zealand and beyond. Monster lovers of all shapes and sizes shouted together, "Release the monsters!" Meanwhile, Joseph and Toby were in for a surprise. "Oh!" exclaimed Toby as he urgently patted Joseph on the shoulder. "It's Bruce Alford." Joseph couldn't believe his eyes. Wading through the protesters, with a string of fans behind him, was the big-time movie star Bruce Alford. He stood head and shoulders above most people, wore big sunglasses and a massive smile, and was heading straight for Joseph. "Hey there, boys," said Bruce in an American accent. "Love what you're doing. Some pals and I were hoping we could join in." "We?" asked Joseph, and Bruce gestured down the street. Someone had rolled out a red carpet, and a flock of famous faces were strutting down it towards the protest. They were movie stars, singers, models, athletes, TV personalities, and more. Joseph didn't know all of them, but he recognized most. "I can't," said Toby, his whole body shaking and his eyes exploding out of his head. "Celebrities everywhere, this is the best day ever. Welcome aboard," said Joseph, who shook Bruce Alford's hand and watched as the celebrities lifted signs and added their voices to the chant. Inside, Lickety and Split had been busy bees. They knew what was coming next, and rather than fight the protest, they prepared for a much bigger threat. "They are here," Lickety wailed. "We are not ready. They will shut us down. They will shut it, will ya? We are fine," Split said, thought his shaking hands betrayed his inner feelings. A knock at the building's rear door sent ice down Hoffman's spines. When they opened the door, they found a bald man in a black suit. "M.I.O. Agent David D. Light," the man said as he flashed on an ID badge. "I'm sure you know why I am here." Chapter 8. The front door to Lickety and Split's really very good monster hunting company burst open and the protest fell silent. Joseph and Toby approached the entrance with the other protesters close behind them. A man wearing a black suit stepped into the street, cast a cold eye over the crowds, and eventually looked down at the boys. Agent David D. Light, MIO. I need a word with the ringleader here. MIO, Toby gasped. You are like secret agents, but for supernatural things. I can neither confirm nor deny that statement, said the light. He removed his sunglasses and met Joseph's eyes. You are the leader, I understand. Those monsters didn't hurt anyone, Joseph said, his arms crossed. We are not leaving until they are released. Let's step inside and discuss your concerns with the owners. With the triumphant roars of the crowd behind them, Joseph and Toby followed Agent Delight back into the building and were shocked by what they saw. Nicotine and Split had been busy indeed. The entire building was cleaned from top to bottom. Monsters roamed freely, sniffing at scratching spots, eating merrily and rolling around in fresh hay. Some were even playing with balls and strings of yarn. Edith, Joseph exclaimed as he spotted Miss Terrortoes shivering in a sparkling clear corner. He rushed over to the monster and threw his arms around her. Edith did a bark snort, which Joseph knew to be a happy sound, and nuzzled her snout into his neck. See, we don't know what the fuss is about, said Lickety, who was wearing a top hat for some reason. All the monsters are happy enough. We take right good care of them. That's a lie, shouted Joseph. They had them in tiny cages and this place was horrid. He's just making a fuss, snarled Split. Regular little brat who doesn't like the word no. Everything meeting official MIO guidelines for monster housing, said Delight, and these men have a permit that means they are allowed to keep pests like monsters unless you can prove they are being mistreated. I have to roll in favor of the hunters. Joseph was just about ready to scream. Lickety and Split were lying straight to the agent's face. As soon as he left, they had go back to their old ways of cramming monsters into tiny cages. He knew they would. It wasn't right, but how could he stop it? How could he fix it? Toby's recording, Joseph exclaimed. He snatched Toby's phone, found the recording of their first visit, and stuffed the screen in Delight's face. We have proven it's right here. Agent Delight watched the video, frowning right then, he said, turning to face a very scared looking Lickety and Split. You gentlemen are in trouble. Lickety and Split shouted, demanded, and eventually begged, but it made no difference. Agent Delight slapped handcuffs around their wrists and led them out of the door. But Joseph wasn't paying attention. He was too busy giving Edith a big fat hug. The world watched on celebrity as a stream of monsters stamped out of liquidity and spread really very good monster hunting company. Some of the creatures fell into the arms of loved ones, whilst others rushed into alleyways or disappeared into sewers. It didn't matter where they went. Monsters could look after themselves. It only mattered that they were free. Joseph waved goodbye to Toby, who was busy speaking excitedly with the new crows and celebrities. He had a small gang of little monsters twisting around his feet. It seemed Toby had made some monster friends of his own. Back home, Joseph wrestled with Edith. They laughed, tickled, played, and eventually fell asleep together. I don't understand, Dad whispered to Mom as they watched Joseph and Edith sleeping. She's just so monstrous. Maybe, said Mom, but she makes Joseph happy. They closed the door, leaving Joseph and Edith to their shared slumber. Edith's snoring was loud and thunderous that night, like a chugging steam train or Dad. To Joseph, those snores were a second blanket. They were vital and he had never be without them again. The end. Have a good night.